IVM.
Welcome back to yet another episode of Cyberpoint by Checkpoint. What do you think of when you hear the word ransom? A bunch of kidnappers wearing a mask? Well, criminals have gone digital now, and today electronic devices can be held captive too. Ransomware is a threat that's been on a significant rise over the past few years. Hackers today can use ransomware to stop airlines, hospitals, banks, and even entire governments from functioning properly. Hello, I'm Shiladitya Mukhopadhyay, and on this episode of Cyberpoint by Checkpoint, we discuss ransomware and how to stay safe from it with Mr. Prakash Bell, who leads the security engineering team for India and SAARC at Checkpoint Software Technologies. Our conversation begins right after this short break.
How fast is the tech landscape changing? There's constant innovation around every corner, and everywhere I look, there's an amazing startup coming up with fascinating and disruptive technologies. Hi, I am Shiladitya Mukhopadhyay, host of the Shunya One podcast on the IVM Podcast Network. On every episode, I talk to the country's leading entrepreneurs about their businesses and startups. We discuss the intricacies of their product, how they started to where they are going, and what today's ever-evolving tech landscape is like. So tune in every alternate Friday for fresh episodes. You can catch Shunya One on the IVM Podcast app, website, or wherever you get your podcast from.
Hi, Prakash. How are you doing? Welcome back to yet another episode.
Good afternoon, Shiladitya. Great to be connected again. It's been some time. I think
Correct.
we spoke last time around. And
Correct.
I think today we have some interesting topics to discuss as well. So look forward to the conversation.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think our topics are bound to be interesting. Last time we spoke about phishing, and so many interesting things around it. And of course, it's a topic which people probably didn't know as much as you shared with us that day. So thank you so much for that. And I'm looking forward to the same today. We have a equally interesting and hot topic today, which is ransomware. And I think ransomware is also a word which I think people have heard, people have definitely come across it, read articles or something about it, but they probably don't know a lot of the detail and how exactly this is a major threat to pretty much all our lives, because we work on software and we work on platforms where ransomware can attack. So Prakash, as always, why don't you give us a good understanding of what exactly is the threat of ransomware, and why is it called
Sure.
so, in fact?
Sure. So ransomware has been grabbing the headlines, particularly in the last 2 years predominantly. And one of the reasons why it has become to the fore is that because of the COVID period has made a lot of people work remotely.
Right.
And many of them have been working with whatever devices they have with probably little or no level of protection. And they're also working from their homes, generic Wi-Fi hotspots, and so on and so forth. Now, with this, the perimeter of an office has gone beyond the physical office that we are all
Right.
used to before. And what this makes is that it has become very easy for the bad actors or the threat actors to attack these individuals who are using these ad hoc networks for accessing their corporate as well as their personal data and so on. Now, coming back to ransomware, I think all of us have heard multiple news headlines which have
Yeah.
been made for the wrong reasons, of course, where corporations have been taken to ransom. No pun intended. I'll explain to you where that comes in. Now, we've had multiple instances of ransomware over the last couple of years, and it's spiked significantly. And to give you an idea about the gravity of the situation on hand, every 40 to 50 seconds, organizations are being attacked through a ransomware penetration.
Wow.
Okay, and this is across the globe. And the amount of damage ransomware causes is huge. And if I were to pick one, the WannaCry, which was very big, had a very big impact for wrong reasons, of course, is that it is supposed to have caused an estimated damage of almost close to $4 billion. And that's a huge amount of money.
Yeah.
And an average cost of a ransomware attack, should an organization succumb to it, is around $3.5 to $4 million per attack.
Wow.
So we are talking about a colossal amount of impact for businesses, their continuity, and so on and so forth. Now, to talk about ransomware, what is it? Ransomware is nothing but it's a malware trying to take over a device or the credentials of a user, and thereby it prevents access, legitimate access to the owner of the device through locking him out as well as encrypting all his data files and completely barring access for that individual. Now, the only way to recover this, obviously, this is the first step where the attack happens, right? This is followed by a message to the end user through the malware itself that he has to pay a ransom if he has to get his system back, in which case his data unencrypted so that he can start accessing and getting control of the files and his system as well. So naturally, that is where the word ransomware comes from, as the name itself implies. Right? And through this, while it started off targeting individuals for $100, $200, securing their laptops inadvertently through this malware, it has started to spread across to a lot of big businesses. And businesses are also being threatened in terms of the bad actors to release huge amounts of money. And that is where I gave the statistics of about it can range from a few $1 million onwards with every attack, where some of their key data servers and systems can get encrypted and they can be completely shut down without any access to their own data as well. So that is the gravity of the situation, and it's a very, very serious and a grave situation to be in, and not being able to access one's own data, be it for a business or a personal purpose.
Wow. And this is obviously, like you said, it's become bigger during COVID because of people working from home. What is the, let's say, what's the state in India especially? Like how bad is this already? And beyond the news headlines we've heard, what's your, let's say, state of, ransomware attacks happening in India particularly?
See, India, as you know, has gone very digital over the last half a decade or even close to a decade now, right? And in the last 2 years, we as a services company to the entire world, with so many global corporations being residing here, having their back offices as well as services arms working out of here, we have hundreds and thousands of remote workers continuing to provide services to keep businesses running around the world, right? That aside, we are also a hub for a huge financial services industry. And on top of it, we also have a huge amount of research and investment happening in the pharma and the medical sciences, right? Combined with all this, naturally, India is a very, very optimal target for some of these threat actors. And in the last couple of years, the number of threats against India has increased, or the attacks have increased. And if I were to share some statistics, India is seeing 50% more attacks than the rest of the world on an average.
Wow.
Okay. And if you look at the global malware impact, India is probably seeing anywhere between 2 to 2.5 times than the global average again. And over the last several months, in particular during the COVID period, phishing attacks had increased. We had spoken about it in the last episode, right? And that remains to be a very, very important form of delivering malware, which lead to ransomware, interestingly.
Yeah, it's all
so we continue to remain under threat, but at the same, yes, they're all connected, right? And I think it's a point of entry to get into a system. Now, with that said, I think Indian corporations have not taken this lightly, and so has the Indian government. They have formulated laws as well as tightened up cyber rules. And we are working in a lot of businesses to kind of beef up their cybersecurity posture so that businesses don't fall to these kind of ransomware attacks.
Have there been prominent attacks already? I mean, I know you mentioned WannaCry already. What was the scale of it specifically, or any others that come to mind?
Let me talk about a couple of them, very unrelated industries, but very interesting ones, which serves as a shocker, is that one is with a very, very large oil company. It's called Colonial Pipeline. And this was making the headlines again because of the prominence of the attack. This happened in the US. And the Colonial Pipeline happens to be the one of largest oil pipeline companies with about 5,500 miles of pipelines running all the way from Texas to the East Coast up to New York, New Jersey area. Now, this was shut down for several days because of a ransomware attack. And this was claimed by a threat actor group, which is called as a dark side, which is suspected to be operating from Eastern Europe and Russia. And they shut down the entire plant for basically and the pipeline for several days together. So this was not just an attack on some of the servers alone, but through their infection, they took control of their entire OT equipment in terms of the equipment which controls their plant and everything. And they were able to completely seize control and stop all functionalities of this. Now, due to which oil movement was restricted, the airline industry was deeply affected because of paucity of oil supply. Many other businesses and consumers were affected across America. And this lasted for almost a week plus, till the company chose to pay the ransom and get their systems back in control. So that tells you the level to which these kind of bad actors go in terms of taking control of a business or holding a business to ransom again.
Wow.
We had another similar one. I'll keep it very brief. This is again a completely unrelated company. They are in a different industry altogether. They're one of the largest beef producers in the US called JBS Beef. And they, again, were a target of and a victim as well, unfortunately, for ransomware attack. and they had to pay up around close to $11 million to get their
Wow,
systems back.
that's
And
crazy.
Colonial Pipeline paid around close to 4.5 to 5 million. So these are all huge amounts of money that these bad actors are collecting from organizations through this malware penetration.
That's crazy. In fact, it's obviously the next thing I would love to ask is what do you do? How do you, if people can take over factories and infrastructure beyond, let's say, just software and laptops and hardware, what does one do? How do you stay safe?
Sure, that's a very good question, right? I mean, it is something which is there in the mind of everybody when even when you're reading these articles, either it on the web or in a newspaper and so on and so forth, right? Like we spoke, Shiladitya, in the previous session also, user education and awareness is
Right.
very important in a digital world, right? And the more knowledgeable people are, they are very they can practice some digital hygiene and cyber hygiene in terms of making sure that they do not fall prey to some of these things. As an individual, there are some steps you can do, and as an organization also you can do a few steps. Let me start with the individual level. For the common man who is using a computer or a laptop to do his day-to-day banking businesses, paying bills and so on. So again, knowledge, develop some level of cyber knowledge in terms of how these attacks can reach out to you. And as I said, phishing is a very common way of doing it. Another is in terms of some of the URLs that could get shared with you. Maybe it could be through a social media or a different medium. One has to be wary about which URLs you click on, whether it's from a known trusted source and so on. And also downloading software through some of these URLs, one has to be very careful about and make sure that they do it only from trusted sources. And some of the security measures, if I was looking at it, what I would do, I would make sure my operating system is latest and up to date with the most latest patches. Install a firewall. Most operating systems today have a built-in firewall. Turn that on. And if you'd like to go for a third party, please do so. And many antivirus packages also come with a firewall. Install an antivirus package. Now, having an antivirus package, there is no guarantee it is going to protect you from ransomware.
Right.
And I'll tell you why. Antivirus packages typically look at signatures and match signatures for known threats, whereas ransomware and other types of modern malware are very behavioral in the sense that they impregnate and they do not have typical signatures which are known, or what we call as a zero-day threats, right? So you should have a platform or a tool which you're using, which is capable of leveraging on AI and ML related technologies to be able to notice this behavior which is happening in your system in the background and automatically remediate by taking control and shutting off those wayward processes which are trying to encrypt your data and so on and so forth. So choosing the right AV with the malware protection is going to be very important. And some of them also offer ransomware support as well. And besides this, of course, whichever software you choose to install on your machine, pick well-known, reputed ones, change your password frequently, and some of the other things that you can do as an individual. And most importantly, we need to back up our data to keep it safe as well, just in case if it gets encrypted, you always have a safe copy to fall back on, just in case. As an organization, I think this is an area where Checkpoint does a lot of work with global companies across the world, right? Our mantra has been in terms of prevention. Prevent it even before it happens, because detection comes late. If you detect something, then it means it's already there in your system.
Correct.
Right? So we've been emphasizing on prevention, and the way we've been accomplishing this is through investing into AI and ML related technologies with auto remediation as well, because many a times you need the software to be clever enough to know to draw a boundary in terms of where the infections have happened and quickly remediate all of the spots without leaving even one crumb in there, which could probably start to become active again, right? And for companies, what we say is that have multiple layers of security, which is not just one single product or a solution. You would need to have multiple layers for different reasons, that you would be able to have different levels of effectiveness across these layers, and penetration becomes a whole lot difficult. And some of the other things that we work with them in terms of beefing up on is like having a very strong email platform. And a case in point, our Harmony email and collaboration solution is one of the best in the industry. It is not only able to kind of look at known threats, but also in terms of behavioral analysis and using AI and ML, even predict threats which typically will not get spotted. And there are a whole bunch of other things that organizations are looking into today. You would have heard about terms like EDR and XDR. Investing in those kind of technologies will also give you a visibility in terms of where the threats are coming in from, how you can curtail it, as well as take preventive action. So there are a whole bunch of things an organization can do in terms of beefing up their security and making it very strong. And last but not least, nothing stops two things. One is preparing for an attack and readying with a plan should you get infected, what to do next. I think that is very, very
Yeah.
important, because if we get paralyzed, the spread can happen very fast within the system, just
Yeah.
like a virus in our body,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
And the second piece is making sure every person in your organization understands the gravity of this and seriousness, and have periodic education for them so that they know that they are not doing anything inadvertently that will expose their corporate password, or like clicking on a phishing email link and so on and so forth. So every safeguard is taken.
Right. You mentioned, Prakash, about obviously Checkpoint's role in all of this, and the fact that you do provide, let's say, solution software and this entire framework for preventing this from happening. So, what does Checkpoint play in preventing, as well as, let's say, if you are paralyzed, can it help? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So one is, of course, anything and everything starts with having the right kind of tools and technologies implemented so that you do not have to undergo all this pain from a business standpoint, right?
Correct.
So there are multiple levels of product that we have. And if I were to touch upon three different pillars, one is the Quantum family provides you complete network security through form of firewalls and gateways, which have sophisticated capabilities in thwarting threats at your office perimeter. The second piece is people are now gravitating towards cloud and migrating their workloads to cloud.
Yeah.
So we have a similar and a very, very robust solution for traffic entering and egressing from cloud through our CloudGuard portfolio. And not just that, we also have solutions which monitor the conversations which are happening within various applications to make sure that it is all not malicious and it's all like legitimate conversations that are going on between applications, so that there is no possibility of a breach within there, right? The third piece is, as I said, users are today working from home, coffee shops, wherever they are, they're roaming, whatever, right? We need to provide them very secure access to their corporate infrastructure as well as to the cloud services that they are accessing. But at the same time, they also need to have their end devices protected, be it their laptops, mobile phones, and iPads. So we have a solution for the entire gamut of these. And the last piece of solution is provided by the Harmony family of products, securing the endpoints and mobile devices. Notwithstanding, today, Shiladitya, you will be surprised that there are so many other smart devices which connect back into a corporate network.
Correct.
Starting from your fax machine, your printer, which is network connected, your video cameras, your office access control systems, and so on and so forth.
Yes.
Now, all of these devices, and like the ones I mentioned before, in terms of the control systems which manage the plant, what we call as OT, IoT kind of devices, even those need to be secured today. And we have solutions for that as well. So it is not just the compute infrastructure, but also the OT, IoT infrastructure we have solutions for, to ensure that you have a complete blanket around anything and everything which is network connected, exchanging information, and it stays secure.
Wow. And yeah, very important, especially after hearing that the story about the oil pipelines. I think anything which has, a digital or, software interface is potentially an attack surface. And yeah, I'm glad to hear that there are folks like yourself, companies like Checkpoint, definitely helping in making this less apparent in the world. So on closing thoughts, Prakash, what do we do apart from, let's say, you mentioned education, even that's just like we spoke about phishing, ransomware. It's important that people understand what it is. Anyone listening to this episode obviously now knows quite a bit more about what this is, what the reality of this threat is, and the fact that it's really happening. It's happening. Early stat you mentioned was almost 40-50 every 40-50 seconds there is some attack happening. So this seems like it's automated to some extent. It's rampant almost. There are attackers looking for weaknesses in every system everywhere. So, as we go about our days, as our lives become more digital, your closing thoughts on how to make sure we don't fall victim to any of this.
I think, again, to the listeners of our podcast, I think one of the reasons they're listening to us is that they want to learn more about this.
Yes.
And I think it's not just them consuming this information. As I've said before, it is important for them to share this with their family members, as well as their other work colleagues and peers, right? The more people understand and become aware of these kind of threats, I think they will be more guarded. And there are a lot of organizations doing this from a public education perspective. Like you would see a lot of emailers coming from your banks, your insurance companies, telling you what to do and what not to do from time to time, warning you. right? So we are still in the infancy stage as far as this knowledge being very, very common across everybody. But I think given the reach of digital technologies in the social media today and various other platforms, I'm sure our folks would start to learn all this very quickly. And we need to be very, very safe against these kind of things, because it's not only our personal data which is at stake, because today everything is being transacted digitally. But at the same time, whenever we go and work in a corporation, we also contribute our bit in terms of making that as a safer environment as well.
No, thank you, Prakash. Thank you so much for enlightening us further on what ransomware really is. Definitely, everyone listening today is now a lot more aware of this reality of the fact that everything's connected. Whether it's that small phishing email which you thought would be just harmless, stealing your data, to actually someone using that to implementing, let's say, a bad piece of malware into your hardware, into your laptop or your machine, and then just taking over your entire data or network, or worse, your actual physical infrastructure. So thank you so much for sharing this, Prakash, and of course thank you for being on yet another episode of Cyberpoint by Checkpoint. We look forward to having you again and continuing the conversation around these topics.
Thank you, Shiladitya. Thank you for having me.
So thank you for tuning in to this episode of Cyberpoint by Checkpoint. Make sure to check out the show notes for more details on everything we talked about today, and also check out Checkpoint's website at www.checkpoint.com and follow them on social media.
Are you looking for finance products and services that can enhance your personal finance experience? Are you looking for a space to talk about your financial product or service? And are you looking for a crisp talk show where the conversation is all about money? Well, your search ends here. Hi, my name is Anupam Gupta and I'm host of the Paisa Vaisa podcast, and I invite you for the conversation about your personal finance on each Monday on the IVM Podcast app or the website, or on any podcast streaming platforms. See you folks.
Hello, everybody. It's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On the Habit Coach, Ashton explains the meaning of red flags in relationships and the fears developing around them. On the Filter Coffee podcast, Karthik talks to Shiladitya, mission head at the UN, about the intricacies of gender equality and the essential change in societal outlook towards women. On the Ideas Project, Anupam interacts with Swarup Mohanty. Swarup is the CEO at Mirai Assets and Deepak Shenoy of Capital Mind. Okay, that's not right. On the Ideas Project, on the Ideas Project, this is an exciting new show you should check out if you haven't yet. Anupam interacts with Swarup Mohanty, who is the CEO at Mirai Assets, and Deepak Shenoy, who is the CEO of Capital Mind. They discuss the ongoing savings disruptions in the Indian markets. On Cock and Bull, Cyrus, Kajol, Vineet, and Shreyas discuss their Independence Day celebrations. I dropped into this episode for a short time as well. And on All Things Policy, the Takshashila folk discuss the twists and turns in Delhi's excise policy. Once again, I'd like to remind you all, please do check out our merch. It's available on IVM Podcast website. Go click the shop tab and you'll be able to see our first collections of t-shirts. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Remember, we got a bunch of YouTube channels as well, and if you want to check that out, go to our website, ivmpodcast.com/YouTube. We have a list of all those channels. And remember, do tell a friend if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter. Word of mouth is one of the most important and best ways for us to get the word out about this podcast. Also, it's a way for you to have discussions about a podcast with your friends. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Boat Lifestyle, Checkpoint Software, Small Case, and Intel vPro. Thank you so much for making this possible.